The bathroom door creaked open, and my heart stopped. I stood there, naked, steam curling around me like a fleeting shield, my towel just out of reach on the counter. Ethan, my stepson, froze in the doorway, his green eyes locking onto mine with a look I'd never seen before. Not disgust, not anger, but something raw, unguarded, and dangerously curious. It was a Tuesday evening in our quiet Seattle suburb, the kind of place where picket fences and manicured lawns hid secrets better than any city high-rise. I'd been Ethan's stepfather for 3 years, married to his mother, Laura, in a union that was more partnership than passion. At 42, I'd settled into the role of provider, confidant, an occasional referee for Ethan's 21-year-old storms. He was straighter, so he'd always declared, with the kind of cocky certainty only youth could muster. But that look in his eyes, that fleeting, electric moment, unraveled everything I thought I knew about him, about me, about us. I grabbed the towel, fumbling to cover myself. My voice caught somewhere between a laugh and a curse. Ethan. Shit. Knock next time. I managed. But he didn't move. He just stood there, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his flannel shirt unbuttoned at the top, revealing a sliver of tanned skin. His silence was louder than any apology, and the air between us crackled with something I couldn't name. You okay? I asked, my voice softer now. Searching his face for answers he wasn't ready to give. He blinked, shook his head like he was waking from a dream, and muttered, Yeah. Sorry. You. Didn't know you were in here. But he didn't leave. Not right away. And that hesitation, that single heartbeat of pause, planted a seed of doubt in my carefully constructed world. I was a gay man, out to Laura but discreet, living in a marriage that worked because we both played our parts. Ethan knew. Of course, they'd known since he was 18. When Laura explained it with her usual pragmatism, he'd shrugged it off then, said it didn't matter. But this moment, this look, felt like it mattered more than either of us could admit. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Laura was at her book club, leaving Ethan and me to navigate the awkwardness alone. We ordered pizza, sat on opposite ends of the couch, and watched some mindless action movie. But the tension hung heavy, like fog rolling in off Puget Sound. I caught him stealing glances not at the screen, but at me. Each time, I pretended not to notice, but my pulse quickened, betraying the calm I tried to project. Ethan, I said finally, during a lull in the movie's explosions. You want to talk about it? My voice was steady, but my hands gripped the edge of the couch like it was a lifeline. He shifted, his jaw tightening, and for a moment, I thought he'd bolt. But then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, I don't know what I'm feeling, Tom. And it's freaking me out. Those words hit like a punch. I'd spent years burying my own desires, locking them away to keep this family intact. Laura and I had an understanding she had her freedom. I had mine, as long as it stayed out of sight. But Ethan, he was the line I'd never cross, the boundary I'd sworn to respect. He was my stepson, straight, untouchable. Yet here he was, unraveling me with a single sentence. I leaned forward, careful to keep my voice even. It's okay to feel confused, I said. Feelings don't always make sense right away. But even as I spoke, I felt like a fraud. My own feelings were a tangled mess: guilt, longing, fear, all swirling together like the steam in that bathroom. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap between us. But I didn't. Not yet. Ethan nodded, his eyes dropping to the floor. I've never looked at a guy like that before, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. And it was you, Tom. That's what's messing with my head. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. This was dangerous territory, a tightrope over a chasm I'd spent years avoiding. Let's just take it one step at a time, I said, more to myself than to him. But as the movie droned on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd already taken the first step and there was no going back. By the time Laura got home, Ethan had retreated to his room, and I was left with the dishes and a mind racing with questions. I scrubbed the plates harder than necessary, trying to drown out the memory of his eyes, his words, his hesitation. I was supposed to be the adult here, the one with answers. But all I had was a growing sense of unease and a spark of something I hadn't felt in years: hope. The next morning, the house felt different, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stood at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee, when Ethan shuffled in, his hair still messy from sleep. He didn't meet my eyes, just grabbed a mug and stood a little too far away, like proximity might ignite something neither of us was ready for. "Morning," I said, aiming for normalcy, but my voice sounded strained, like a guitar string tuned too tight. He mumbled something back, his gaze fixed on the coffee pot as if it held the secrets of the universe. I wanted to ask about last night, to dig into whatever was brewing beneath his silence. But Laura's footsteps on the stairs stopped me cold. She breezed in, all smiles and morning energy, oblivious to the undercurrent between us. "Tom, you're spoiling us with this coffee," she said, planting a kiss on my cheek. I forced a smile, but my eyes flicked to Ethan, who was now staring out the window, his jaw set. Laura didn't notice, she never did. That was our deal. She lived her life, I lived mine, and we kept the facade intact for Ethan, for the neighbors, for the world. But Ethan wasn't playing along anymore. Over the next few days, he started finding excuses to be around me, helping with yard work, lingering at the dinner table, asking questions about my day with an intensity that felt personal. I tried to keep things light, to steer us back to safe ground. But every interaction felt charged, like static electricity waiting for a spark. One afternoon, while Laura was at work, Ethan found me in the garage, tinkering with an old bike I'd been meaning to fix. "Need a hand?" he asked, leaning against the workbench, his voice casual, but his eyes anything but. I nodded, grateful for the distraction, and we worked side by side, the clink of tools filling the silence. But then he spoke, low and deliberate. "Tom, do you ever feel something you're not supposed to?" My wrench slipped, clattering to the floor. I crouched to pick it up, buying time to steady my racing heart. "All the time," I admitted, standing slowly. "But feelings aren't the problem. It's what you do with them." I met his gaze, and there it was again, that look, unguarded and searching, like he was seeing me for the first time. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. "What if I don't know what to do?" he asked, his voice raw, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard. My breath caught, and for a moment, The world narrowed to just us two people standing on the edge of something forbidden. Something that could break everything. I stepped back, my back hitting the workbench. "Ethan, we can't," I started. But he cut me off, his voice sharp with frustration. "Why not?" "Because of Mom. Because I'm supposed to be straight. I don't even know who I am anymore, Tom. But I know I feel something when I'm with you." The confession hung between us, heavy and undeniable. I wanted to tell him to stop, to walk away, to protect us both from the fallout. But the truth was, I felt it too at pull. That ache, that reckless need to close the distance between us. Instead, I said, "We need to be careful. It could hurt a lot of people." He nodded, but the look in his eyes said he wasn't convinced. That night, I lay awake next to Laura, her steady breathing a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I'd spent years building walls around my heart, but Ethan was tearing them down, brick by brick, with every glance, every word. And the scariest part, I wasn't sure I wanted him to stop. The days that followed were a tightrope walk. Ethan and I moved around each other like planets caught in the same orbit, drawn together but terrified of collision. Laura, bless her, remained blissfully unaware. Her life a whirlwind of work and social commitments that left little room for scrutiny. But I saw the change in Ethan. His laughter was quieter, his eyes more guarded. Yet he sought me out, his presence a constant reminder of the line we were towing. One evening, we ended up alone again, this time on the back porch, the Seattle skyline a distant glow against the dusk. Ethan nursed a beer, his fingers fidgeting with the label, while I sipped mine, trying to ignore the way his knee brushed mine under the table. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the evening hum of crickets. "Like starting over somewhere else?" I leaned back, the wicker chair creaking under my weight. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But it's not that simple. Your mom. This life's complicated." I paused, then added, "What about you? What's got you thinking about running away?" He shrugged, but his eyes betrayed him, flickering with something deeper. "Just feels like I'm living someone else's life," he said. "Like I'm supposed to be this guy straight, predictable, the perfect son. But I'm not sure that's me anymore." His voice cracked, and my heart ached for him, for the boy wrestling with a truth he wasn't ready to face. I wanted to reach out, to tell him he wasn't alone. But the weight of my role stepfather, protector, held me back. Instead, I said, "You don't have to have it all figured out, Ethan. You're allowed to question, to explore. Just be honest with yourself." It was the kind of advice I wish someone had given me at his age, when I was drowning in shame and secrecy. He turned to me, his face half lit by the porch light. And for a moment, I thought he might kiss me. The air was thick with possibility, with danger. But he didn't. He just nodded, his lips parting like he wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. We sat in silence after that, the space between us both a barrier and a bridge. The next day, Ethan came out to his college friends. I overheard him on the phone, his voice steady but laced with nerves, as he told them he was questioning his sexuality. My chest tightened with pride and fear. Pride for his courage, fear for what it meant for us. Laura was thrilled when he told her, her liberal heart bursting with support. But she didn't see the way his eyes sought mine across the dinner table, asking questions neither of us could answer out loud. That night, he knocked on my study door, his silhouette framed by the hallway light. "Can we talk?" he asked, and I nodded, my throat tight. We sat on the couch, closer than we should have, and he told me about his friend's reaction, some supportive, some confused, one cruel. "I don't care what they think," he said, his voice fierce. "But I care what you think, Tom." I swallowed, my hands clasped to keep them from trembling. "I think you're brave," I said, braver than I ever was. And then, because I couldn't stop myself, I added, "And I'm here, Ethan. Whatever you need." It was a promise, a confession, a step into the unknown. And as he looked at me, his eyes soft and searching, I knew we were running out of time to pretend this was nothing. The summer heat crept into Seattle, heavy and unrelenting, mirroring the pressure building between Ethan and me. We were careful, too careful, avoiding lingering touches or too long glances. But the unspoken was louder than ever. Laura noticed nothing, her focus on a new promotion at work, leaving us in a dangerous bubble of our own making. One Saturday, Ethan asked me to go hiking with him in the Cascades. "Just us," he said, his voice casual but his eyes pleading. I agreed, telling myself it was just a hike, just a chance to clear our heads. But as we trekked through the forest, the air thick with pine and possibility, I felt the weight of every step. He walked ahead, his backpack bouncing, his confidence a stark contrast to the boy who'd stood frozen in my bathroom weeks ago. At a clearing by a stream, we stopped to rest, the water's rush filling the silence. Ethan sat on a rock, his shirt damp with sweat, and looked at me with an intensity that made my chest ache. "Tom," he said, his voice low, "what if I'm not straight? What if I'm something else?" The question hung there, raw and vulnerable, and I wanted to pull him into my arms, to tell him it was okay, that he was enough. But I didn't. I sat beside him, close enough to feel the heat of his body, and said, "Then you're still you, Ethan. Labels don't change that." But even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't that simple, not for him, not for me, not for the family we were risking. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to?" he asked, and the question cut deeper than I expected. I thought of Laura, of the compromises we'd made, of the men I'd loved in secret before her. "Yeah," I admitted, my voice rough. "And it's never easy." He nodded, his gaze dropping to the stream. "I think I'm falling for you," he said, so quietly I almost missed it. My heart stopped, then raced. 1,000 emotions crashing together: joy, fear, guilt, longing. I wanted to say it back, to confess that he'd been in my thoughts, my dreams, my every quiet moment. But I didn't. I couldn't. "Ethan," I said instead, "we can't do this. Not like this." His face fell, but he didn't argue. We hiked back in silence, the distance between us wider than ever. That night, I found a note slipped under my study door. In Ethan's messy scrawl, "I'm sorry. I just needed you to know." I held it, my hand shaking, and knew we were past the point of no return. The note burned a hole in my pocket for days. I carried it with me. A secret heavier than any I'd ever kept. Ethan kept his distance, his eyes avoiding mine at breakfast, his laughter absent from the house. Laura sensed something was off, but chalked it up to his college stress, her maternal instincts missing the truth by miles. I tried to focus on work, on the mundane rhythm of life. But Ethan's words echoed in my head. I think I'm falling for you. I was 42, married to his mother, and yet I felt like a teenager, dizzy with want and terrified of the consequences. I'd spent years burying my desires, but Ethan had unearthed them, and now I was drowning in them. One night, unable to sleep, I found him in the living room, staring at the TV with the sound off. Can't sleep either, I asked, sitting on the armrest of the couch, careful to keep space between us. He nodded, his eyes red-rimmed, and I wondered if he'd been crying. Tom, he said, his voice breaking. I don't know how to stop this. I don't know if I want to. I should have walked away. I should have sent him to bed, told him to forget it, to move on. But instead, I moved closer, my hand brushing his shoulder. We can't keep doing this to ourselves, I said, but my voice betrayed me, soft and pleading. He turned, his face inches from mine, and for a moment, I thought we'd cross the line. Kiss, confess, destroy everything. But the front door opened, Laura's voice calling out, and we sprang apart, guilt searing through me. She didn't notice, just chatted about her late meeting. But the moment lingered, a wound that wouldn't heal. Ethan excused himself, and I was left with the ghost of what might have been. The next day, I found him in the backyard, tossing a football to himself, his movements restless. We need to talk, I said, my voice firm. He stopped, the ball dropping to the grass, and nodded. We walked to the edge of the property, where the trees hid us from the house. And I said, this can't happen, Ethan. Not because I don't feel it, but because it would break too much. He looked at me, his eyes fierce. What if I'm willing to break it? He asked. What if I don't care about the consequences? I shook my head, my heart breaking. You're not the only one in this, I said. Your mom. This family, it's bigger than us. But even as I spoke, I wondered if I was trying to convince him or myself. The weeks that followed were torture. Ethan and I danced around each other, our conversations clipped, our glances stolen. Laura started to notice, her brow furrowing when Ethan left the room too quickly or when I grew quiet at dinner. Is everything okay with you two? She asked one night, her voice light but probing. I lied, said it was just stress. But her eyes lingered, suspicious. Ethan, meanwhile, was spiraling. He started staying out late, coming home with the faint smell of whiskey on his breath. I wanted to confront him, to pull him back from whatever edge he was teetering on. But I was part of the problem. One night, I found him on the porch, a bottle in hand, his eyes glassy. Ethan, I said, sitting beside him, you're scaring me. He laughed, a bitter sound. Scaring you? I'm scaring myself. Tom, I'm in love with you, and I don't know how to stop. The words hit like a tidal wave, sweeping away my defenses. I reached for his hand, then stopped myself, my fingers curling into a fist. You don't have to stop, I said, my voice shaking. But we have to figure out what this means. For both of us. He looked at me, his eyes desperate. What if it means leaving? Starting over somewhere else? Just you and me. The idea was intoxicating. A fantasy I'd never dared to entertain. But it was also impossible. Laura. The life we'd built. The promises I'd made, it all stood in the way. We can't, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. The next day, Ethan announced he was moving out. He'd found an apartment near campus. He said, his voice flat as he told Laura over breakfast. She was devastated, begging him to stay. But he was resolute. I watched, silent, my heart splintering as he packed his things. When he hugged me goodbye, his arms lingered, his breath warm against my neck. This isn't over, he whispered. And then he was gone. The house felt empty without him, like a stage missing its lead actor. Laura cried, blaming herself, while I carried the real guilt, a weight that crushed me. I found another note in my study, tucked inside a book. I'll wait for you, Tom. As long as it takes. I burned it, the flames licking away the words, but not the truth they held. Ethan's absence was a wound that wouldn't heal. Laura threw herself into work, leaving me alone with my thoughts, my regrets. I tried to move on, to focus on the life I'd chosen. But every corner of the house held memories of him, his laugh, his touch, his confession. I started running, long miles through the rain-soaked streets, hoping to outrun the ache in my chest. One night, I got a text from him, meet me at the pier. Please. I shouldn't have gone. But I did, pulling on a jacket and driving through the drizzle to the waterfront. He was there, leaning against the railing, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. I can't do this without you, he said, his voice raw. I tried. Tom. I try to be normal, to be what everyone expects. But I love you. I stepped closer, the rain mingling with the tears I hadn't realized were falling. Ethan, this could destroy us, I said. Your mom, my marriage, everything. But he shook his head, his hands finding mine, warm and steady. What's the point of saving something that's already broken? He asked, and I had no answer. We kissed, there in the rain, the world falling away. It was desperate, reckless, everything I'd ever wanted and feared. When we pulled apart, I was trembling, my heart laid bare. We need to tell her, I said, the words heavy but necessary. He nodded, his hand still in mine. And for the first time, I felt like we might survive this. We drove back in silence, the weight of our decision settling over us. Laura was home, reading in the living room. And when she saw us, soaked and solemn, she knew. What's going on? She asked, her voice sharp with fear. I took a breath, Ethan's hand brushing mine for courage, and said, Laura, we need to talk. The truth came out in halting, painful words. Laura listened, her face a mask of shock, then anger, then something softer, resignation. Maybe. Or relief. I knew you were unhappy, she said to me, her voice steady despite the tears. But I didn't know it was this. She looked at Ethan, her son, and her expression broke. And you're sure about this? Ethan nodded, his voice firm. I love him. Mom, I'm sorry, but I do. The room was silent, the weight of our choices pressing down on us. Laura stood, pacing, then stopped. I need time, she said finally. But I don't hate you. Either of you. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. We moved out, Ethan and I, to a small apartment across town. It wasn't easy. Guilt lingered, and the whispers of neighbors followed us. But every morning, waking up beside him, his smile soft in the dawn light, made it worth it. We were building something new, something honest, something ours. Laura and I divorced quietly, amicably, her strength a gift I'd never deserved. She and Ethan rebuilt their relationship, slowly, over coffee dates and long talks. I found a new job, a new purpose, volunteering at a local LGBTQ center, helping others navigate the truths I'd once hidden from. Ethan and I faced the world together, hand in hand, our love a quiet rebellion against the expectations that had bound us. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was real. And as we stood on our balcony one evening, the Seattle skyline glittering before us, he leaned against me and said, "You shook my world, Tom." I kissed his temple, my heart full, and replied, "You shook mine first." Our story wasn't just about love. It was about courage, about choosing truth over comfort, about finding home in the person who sees you, really sees you. And in that, we found me and Inga life not just lived, but felt, deeply and unapologetically.